President Buhari inaugurates new Nigerian Navy ships, boats, and helicopters in Lagos.
The Navy is undeniably a major contributor to the economic well-being of our country.
Federal government flags off COVID-19 vaccination in IDP camps across the country.
This partnership with the National Healthcare Development Agency is the main strategy.
Nigeria's First Lady seeks greater private sector investment in the health sector.
With the establishment of this center, it is hoped that more awareness will be created.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss advancing human rights in Nigeria.
Well, let's start today's introduction, by asking this question. Do you know the most fundamental right you're entitled to as a citizen or person living in Nigeria?
Well, Kieran, that's a very important question. But as you know, the rights doctrine is fully enshrined in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. And you have a number of other international pieces of legislation or protocols or conventions also pertaining to rights. So you hear people talk about the right to privacy, the right to fair trial, fair hearing. You also hear they talk about the right to property. But certainly, the most basic of all human rights is the right to life. For without life, you can't enjoy the other rights that I've just talked about.
Exactly. And these basic rights are hinged on the need for justice, tolerance, mutual respect, and human dignity in all activities of mankind. It is in a bid to protect these rights that the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Certainly, human rights are crucial to ensuring that all persons are treated fairly and equally, and the rights are based on shared values of dignity, fairness, respect, and equality. And the existence of human rights empowers peoples of all ages to speak up when their rights are infringed upon or to report such when they notice that an infringement against any other person or group of persons is in the offing.
In Nigeria, despite the progress made in democratic process, human rights violations have remained recurrent. Reports from National Human Rights Commission indicate that kidnappings, extrajudicial killings, discrimination, sexual and gender-based violence are among the worst human rights violations in the country today.
Now, the International Human Rights Day is celebrated every year on the 10th of October, and this is to commemorate the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN General Assembly on the 10th of December 1948. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone document which proclaims the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political leaning, national or social origin, or indeed any other status.
And this year's Human Rights Day focuses on reducing inequality and advancing human rights. This theme speaks to issues around Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights.
Well, the slogan for this year's Human Rights Day celebration is all human, all equal. And interestingly, the commemoration of this year's International Human Rights Day coincides also with the end of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which began on the 25th of November.
Now, how applicable is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Nigeria, and what is the relevance to democracy and development? Are the vulnerable population protected, And are all rights guaranteed in Nigeria? These are questions the guests we have assembled on Good Morning Nigeria will be answering on the program. My name is Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. Kirian, what you just raised in terms of questions could very well be framed as the status of human rights today in Nigeria with regard to the theme of the celebration. That will be in our conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria, being broadcast live as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are here in our Abuja headquarters studios. It's another chilly morning here in the Federal Capital Territory. It's not official, but I think the temperature is around about 20 degrees or so this morning.
Of course, we've entered another season altogether. So
no question about that. But of course, in the daytime as well as the afternoon, the temperatures, of course, will rise to mid-30s, and then by the evening again, it will drop. That's one huge benefit of Abuja with its many hills around us here. Right now, here is Comfort Amodu, who is taking the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Good morning, Nigerians. President Muhammadu Buhari has reaffirmed Nigerians' enduring commitment to upholding, promoting, and protecting democratic values and principles. Addressing a virtual global summit on democracy convened by U.S. President Joe Biden, the president said institutions that underpin a resilient democratic society will also be strengthened. He said since coming to power in 2015, his administration has been able to introduce mechanisms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections, while key anti-corruption agencies have also been strengthened despite the nation's democratic achievements. President Buhari, however, said Nigeria continues to face the challenge of insecurity, which poses a threat to democracy, and called for global partners to support federal government's effort at tackling insurgency and terrorism. And the president also assured world leaders of his commitment to putting in place necessary mechanisms to ensure that Nigeria records another peaceful transfer of power to an elected democratic government by ensuring free, fair, and transparent elections in 2023. Political office holders must strive to touch lives by coming up with transforming programs to change the narratives on dividends of democracy. President Muhammadu Buhari gave the advice at the launch of an autography of former chairman of the Progressives Congress, Chief B.C. Akonde, in Lagos.
Akande was the victim, along with other AD governors, of a diabolical double cross. This book is a historical document. Students will find this an invaluable source of Nigeria's politics.
He is our president. We love him. He's one of us. We always want him to relax and come and stay with us.
In other news, the president has inaugurated 7 new Nigerian Navy ships, boats and helicopters. Among the boats inducted is the Seaward Defense Boat 3, which is the third indigenous boat built and constructed by the Naval Dockyard Limited. And the president says the feat is in line with the federal government's policy on locally produced goods.
Given our present high dependence on oil and gas revenues, the Navy is undeniably a major contributor to the economic well-being of our country. I commend the Navy's effort at maintaining a steady course in its drive for local content development.
Let's talk health now, as the federal government flags off COVID-19 mass vaccination for persons of concern at the internally displaced persons camps across the country. This, the government says, is part of its commitment to ramp up COVID-19 vaccine uptake in Nigeria. And the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons is the agency driving the effort with support from the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency.
It reduced the burden and the transport fare for our people.
This partnership with the National Healthcare Development Agency is the main strategy.
To make sure that every single person, no matter where they are, is not left behind in terms of their access to vaccines.
The Nigerian Center for Disease Control has confirmed 754 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria as at 9th of December. The breakdown shows that Lagos recorded 595 new cases. The FCT has 68, Imo 49, Oyo 9, and Delta with 5 new cases. Katsina recorded 4 new cases. Edo, Kano, and Plateau recorded 3 new cases each. Ekiti and Gombe has 2 cases each, while Rivers has 1 so far. The total number of confirmed cases is now 215,918, while the number of successfully managed and discharged cases are 207,619, and the death load is reported at 2,981. First Lady of Nigeria, Aisha Buhari, has encouraged well-meaning Nigerians and the private sectors to invest in the health sector to complement government's effort towards improving the general well-being of the citizens of the country. The First Lady stated this at the inauguration of the Professor Felicia Anuma Diabetes and Endocrine Center at the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital.
With the establishment of this center, it is hoped that more awareness will be created on the negative health impact on some of the endocrine disorders and the need for early diagnosis.
The idea to start this center is excellent. Welcome.
This commitment is translated into 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets, and 230 key performance indicators.
Let's take a break now. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly with Kingsley and Kirian.
I'm the Chief Resident Engineer and Project Supervisor of the Second Niger Bridge Project. The Second Niger Bridge Project is a project that has been conceived for a very long time, but it has finally come to life during this present administration. This project has a lot of socio-economic benefits, and it has impacted positively on the lives of the host communities, both in Anambra State and Delta State. The people are very happy. The host communities, they partnered with us because apart from the social benefits, indigenes are also employed on this project. We can see how their lives are being improved.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Everybody knows the secret to good cooking is that special ingredient. The mothers know it, but does this new generation know it? Let's find out. Mothers, daughters, are you ready? Yes! Let the cooking begin.
Erisco tomato paste. Now we get home, now we get love, now we get children. We spice the world with a meal so great and so healthy. You know we've got your back. Oh, with Erisco, Ridico, Nagico.
Ladies and gentlemen, food is ready.
Food of love. Tomato paste. Good food for the body. Yum yum.
Erisco Richico and Nagico tomato paste is made by Erisco Foods Limited, feeding Africans with healthy foods.
How to make a perfect bowl of love? A perfect blend of taste that brings every ingredient to life. The fusion of different spices. The unique aroma that rejuvenates your senses. The heart-warming deliciousness. And the satisfaction that comes from every bite, which makes you say, I love my Indomie.
Give your kids winning energy. Milo Active Go. With the goodness of malt, milk, and cocoa, helps them make the most of every day. Milo, the energy to go further.
it a trip back to Anfield for Steven Gerrard as he takes his new team to face the Reds. This Saturday, it's Liverpool versus Aston Villa on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
You're on to Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, the Katsina State government is reported to have concluded plans with the Nigerian Export Promotion Council to formalize trade at the Jibia Maradi border market, and this is aimed at reducing the volume of informal trade. Our correspondent Aleka Opanachi Aruwa has details.
According to statistics, nearly $12 billion worth of informal exports take place along border markets in Nigeria, with markets in Jibia, Katsina State, having the highest volume of informal trade. To streamline the activities of informal traders and generate reliable trade data along the border markets, the Katsina State government is pushing for the Nigerian Export Promotion Council to establish domestic export warehouses and export trade houses along Jibia Maradi border markets. This visit by the Deputy Governor of Katsina State to the Executive Director and CEO NEPC at the Export House in Abuja saw the seal of the agreement to formalize trade along Jibia Maradi border markets.
We have the site for this project. It's going to be located on an 800 hectare land which we have set aside for green economic zone. In fact, we have also such kind of project that we already designed for that. So it's just like placing it where it is. Maybe either reducing the size of the land or expanding it to your requirement.
Nigerian economy has been affected by this issue of informal trade. They go in, go out, there's no data. And no data and no revenue to government. I don't think that is right. And so we introduced this domestic export warehouse to also ensure that data is collected. But most importantly, sir, this will generate employment for our youth. That's very key.
The establishment of domestic export warehouses and export trade houses in Jibia border market is expected to enhance trade facilitation, generate more foreign exchange, reduce cost of doing business, as well as create employment in Katsina State. And taking a look on tertiary tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Opanachi, Arua.
Well, thank you, Alika, for that business package. Next is newspaper review.
Bayo Atoyobe is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian.
You're welcome,
Good morning,
Bayo.
Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay, let's begin with Al Jazeera for this Friday. INEC to parties bear cost of primaries. Electoral body can't influence any process. Parties must be responsible for expenses. Governors kick. That's on page 8. BC Akonde was victim of OBJ's diabolical double cross, according to Buhari. That's on page 9. CBN advises bank customers to resist illegal and arbitrary charges. That's on page 25. Street hawking still a menace. That's on page 3 of Al Jazeera. COVID-19, federal government begins mass vaccination of refugees, migrants, IDPs. That story is also on page 25 of Al Jazeera. Now, at the bottom of the newspaper, Kanu's international lawyers write to UK ministers, page 9. Bandits kill 16 worshippers in Niger, also on page 9. Sanwo-Olu cancels Lagos Peace Walk, on page 29. More vicious attacks, sparking concerns. That's according to the police. That's on page 30 of Al Jazeera newspaper. Well, that will be all for the front page of Al Jazeera this morning.
All right. Thank you, Kieran. We also have the Nation newspaper. From above the name flag, you have the following headlines. Gunmen kill 9 worshippers in Niger Mosque. And Katsina official murdered. Now, that official is, or was, the commissioner in charge of science and tech in the Katsina State Administration. Troops rescue 20 policemen abducted by terrorists. Minister challenges agencies and officials on service. Below the name flag, Wike to federal government show evidence of borrowed funds. And Sule presents 109 billion naira budget. Now, the photograph there on the front page, one of them shows the public presentation of the book by Chief Bisi Akonde, former governor of Osun State and one of the national leaders of the APC. President Buhari is right there in the middle. You see the Lagos State governor and other chieftains of the party. Buhari, how Akonde, Shoba, and others lost in 2003. And you have the riders there. Another photograph on the front page shows the official inauguration of the Kano-Maiduguri Road. Now, this section of it is 106.3 kilometers. This road has been under construction for many years. That's section 3, that's the Azare Potiskum, and this is in both Yobe and Bauchi states. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari was represented at the inauguration by the Honorable Minister of State for MITI, that's Ambassador Miriam Katagum, and of course you had other dignitaries who were present on the occasion. Sultan to Nigerians, stop blame game, unite against enemies, and count boss urges security agencies to learn from the U.S. 6 motorists shot dead at Zamfara roadblock, and Katsina restores telco service. Page 27. Bayo.
Thank you, Kinsley. Let's start with the news about gunmen that have killed the Commissioner for Science and Technology in Katsina State. In fact, President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the killing and condoled the people and the government of Katsina State. Dr. Rabi Nasru was killed Wednesday night at his house at Fatima Shema quarters in Katsina, apparently killed in the sitting room where traces of blood was found and locked up in the toilet. Security personnel have to force the door open to retrieve the body, who showed a lot of knife cuts to the body and the belly. His body has been deposited in the hospital for pending burial. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Interreligious Council has spoken at its 4th quarter meeting and have called for collective and coordinated approach to solve the problems of insecurity in the nation. Both Sultan Saad Abubakar III and Reverend Samson Ayokunle expressed concern over escalation of highway attack and kidnapping. The Sultan referred to a letter by bandits threatening Christians in Zamfara and asked, what is the work of security agencies if they don't verify such and just allow that to go on to cause worshippers to be frightened? He also admonished religious leaders to be careful and stop being part of the problem. He says, we are not political leaders. As religious leaders, we have to be careful the way we handle, say, or do things, because our followers believe in what we say. They assume whatever we say is from the Bible or the Quran. Reverend Samson Ayokule also lamented that the nation's highway have become dens of kidnappers and no-go areas for travelers. He says, why are they kidnapping and hiding people, and security agencies will not be able to fish them out to their hideouts? Ayokule called for increased intelligence gathering and for public to volunteer information to security to help trace and apprehend the criminals. The Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Interreligious Council, Cornelius Omonua, also called on Christians and Muslims to join hands to fight terrorism and insecurity. And hear him, no terrorist can be a religious person, and no religious person can be a terrorist. Meanwhile, in Edo State, there are instances of students of Edogbo Secondary School in Ikoba, Oka local government area who rioted and destroyed school property. The Commissioner for Education, Dr. John Osa Oviane, says that what the students did, damaging school property estimated of about 3 million, is unacceptable, adding that the students will pay for the damage of the property. He says here in Edo State, we have zero tolerance for destruction of school property. A policeman, the principal and teachers were assaulted. A policeman attached to the school was also stripped. The school is to be shut down until government get it organized. Meanwhile, a task force headed by the Deputy Governor, Philip Shuaibu, has 1 week to look into the riots. On the issue of military, the state commander of the Civil Joint Task Force in Kaduna State, Aminu Sani, has been arrested. Members of the civil group were protesting that he was picked up from his home some 15 days ago. However, at the briefing by the Director of Defense Media Operations, Brigadier General Bernard Onyeko, he said that Aminu Sani, otherwise known as Bolo, was arrested by the military. He says troops of Operation Thunderstrike and Wildstroke arrested the JTF commander over alleged connections with bandits. He was picked up after a notorious bandit arrested 3rd of December at Paka in the community in Igabi revealed that he was aiding banditry in the environment. So you see, security is giving way to conspiracy. Some of persons who are supposed to aid security are aiding conspiracy.
Banditry, from what we have learned so far, and all indications, just as you've just mentioned, it's turning into business. It's turning into business. You recall in the past we have a man that said he made most of his sales as a dealer in bread, you know, by selling to bandits, you know, and all that. So in those communities, you know, where bandits have access to, they were, well, would I say, because of the circumstances, to say, look, instead of us being kidnapped, why don't we cooperate with them, you know, to be able to, you know, have our peace. And that's what I think is going on. Because the JTF man you talked about, you know, now could have been doing this, you know, for his own safety. And of course for his own, for also money making as well. Because if you have to deal with bandits, of course you have a share of the loot. Whenever they have, you know, ransom paid, you have your own share.
Another positive news is that 75 bandits who operate along the Kaduna-Abuja highway have now been eliminated. The briefing by the Defense Director of Defense indicated that the Nigerian Air Force platform took out 45 armed bandits at their location, and those who escaped there were traced to about 4 kilometers away near the NYC camp along the Kaduna-Abuja Expressway, and 30 of them were also neutralized. So for some time now, we are going to have some respite along that highway.
And after that, it's back to business. But I think, gentlemen, there are more fundamental points to also raise. We have raised this issue in the past, and that has to do with correcting the current dysfunction in our security architecture. The mere fact that the military is now involved in internal security operation in virtually all states of the Federation tells you that there are things that are not working properly. And reference is often had to the so-called ungoverned spaces where these bandits and terrorists and kidnappers operate on the highways. And then you say, oh, where are your policemen in the first instance? About half, by some estimates, others would say 1/3 of members of the police force are not on the beat. Instead, they are on VIP and other protection duties.
Politically exposed persons.
That's precisely part of the reason why we are having some of these issues. I'm sure you will have also noticed this. In most Nigerian cities, when you hear the siren, it is a siren of a convoy of one big man or the other. And here in the Federal Capital Territory, I've sometimes wondered, what a visitor would say if right in the heart of the city, you are seeing a troop of bodyguards, a troop of police protection, a troop of DSS officials, and they are usually short convoy by 5 or 6 vehicles, and they are scaring everybody away from the street. On the highway, right in the city, yes, in the Federal Capital Territory, and then you ask yourself, what does this mean? What does this tell me if I were a visitor? It means that the place, if you have to have such a phalanx of security officials around one big man or the other, whose offices have an expiry date anyway, what does it tell you? And are these men and other personnel not supposed to be on the beat? How many of them do you find on foot patrols? How many of them do you find, policing the general environment? And this is why, criminals and other hoodlums are taking advantage of it.
The House of Representatives has given a clarification following intervention and meeting with the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, that INEC has nothing to do with direct or indirect primaries. It is basically a party affair. The mode of direct and indirect primaries provided for in the amended of Electoral Act, and that is generating concern. It has become a silent war between the members of the National Assembly, the legislators, and the Governors Forum. Why? Because politically, to get elected into the National Assembly, the whole process is to pretended and dominated, and most of the time determined by the governors in the states. And this is the legislators fighting for their independence. But blatantly, direct primaries is the responsibility of political parties. INEC's role is just to go there and observe and report to ensure that it is in conformity with the stipulations of that political party's constitution. So INEC says it has no budget for direct or indirect primaries because it is not involved in it.
Sorry, I don't know what to have in our own parlance, but elsewhere, what is the business of an umpire to a party's primary in terms of sponsorship or funding? It has no correlation. I mean, there's no link. There's no need for INEC to fund party primaries. Funding it for who? Is it for the party or for the individuals who are vying for different positions in the party? It doesn't make sense.
No, there was a misgiving. So INEC has clarified that it has no responsibility for that, and therefore it is not making any budgetary provisions for that, because that is not its duty.
Kirian and Bayo, I'm just wondering what the legislative process is in Nigeria. Are these not matters that ought to have been raised at the public hearing when the bill was still under consideration by the National Assembly? Is it after the bill has been passed by the National Assembly and where the National Assembly, two chambers had discrepancies, they had a conference, they harmonized, they passed, and they have transmitted the bill as passed by the National Assembly to the President for his assent. Now we are raising these matters that ought to have been raised, and the National Assembly itself is allowing itself to be dragged into the conversation around whether primaries will cost 500 billion or otherwise. Who calculated 500 billion, and whose cost will it be? Will it be the cost of INEC, or will it be the cost of political parties? And what are the cost factors in 500 billion that we are talking about? These are matters that ordinarily should have been considered at the public hearing while the bill was still in consideration. Even now, assuming the primaries are said to cost, and you have accountants properly calculated and say we want 1 trillion naira, it is the business of political parties.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't even be a subject for conversation in the first place. It should not be.
Also from the National Assembly, specifically from the House of Rep, indications are that the 2022 appropriation bill will be passed by Wednesday next week. The chairman, Media and Publicity, Benjamin Kalu, said that at a briefing that tentatively the report will be laid before the National Assembly on Tuesday, and expectedly it will be passed on Wednesday before they proceed on vacation by 16th of December. It may be recalled that in October, the Appropriation Committee had given indication that hopefully by December 15th, the 2022
Let this not be a routinized passage of the appropriation bill. If you recall, as recently as a week or so ago, there was information about duplication of projects about 252 projects in the 2021 Appropriation Act. And of course, the special advisor to the president did say that those duplications were not funded. As the saying goes, more haste, less speed. So what are the issues? The other day we were talking about the finance bill, some of the provisions there, but an individual possessing a team before you can operate an account. And some of the points that we trashed up are matters, and then you would need enough time, to be able to consider all of it. We know that they are going on research, but the fact that you have to meet the January to December budgetary cycle should be no factor in driving this through, and then at the end of the day, you begin to have, so let's go for supplementary amendments.
Invariably, Kingsley, you should expect to have a supplementary budget, because it has become a pattern, in the recent past. So there's nothing you can do about that.
They've had a good time to work on the budget since October. They have been working on the budget. They have, in fact, had to close plenary to devote more time to the budgeting processes. So hopefully, they will be able to get that through.
All right, Bayo, we'd like to thank you for today's analysis. We hope to see you again on Monday when Good Morning Nigeria will resume for next week. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. We'll be back very shortly.
Ministry of Works and Housing has the responsibility to help improve the quality and the quantity of the road infrastructure asset, which are the roads and the bridges and the highways. At the moment, we have over 13,000 kilometers of road network under repair, reconstruction, or rehabilitation out of the existing 35,000 kilometers of federal road network. These 13,000 kilometers are comprising about 850 different contracts which the ministry superintends across Nigeria. We are fulfilling the mandate of our ministry to expand the connectivity of Nigeria's states and by extension the towns and villages through road transport.
The 2022 Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration is here again. The Nigeria Armed Forces work tirelessly day and night to give us peace to go about our businesses. Some have paid the supreme price. Should we forget the families and loved ones they left behind? No.
I am therefore privileged to honor these veterans who devoted most of their lives, active lives, to securing the nation and the world at large.
So, let's support the Nigerian Armed Forces and their families, corporate organizations, government agencies, parastatals, and individuals. Let's show our love and support for our armed forces. They are our heroes. Buy the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem and donate into the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem Appeal account. We love you, and your labor and sacrifice will not be in vain for spilling your blood for us to live.
The Council of our Fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
It's a trip back to Anfield for Steven Gerrard as he takes his new team to face the Reds. This Saturday, it's Liverpool versus Aston Villa on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
All right, thank you for staying with us on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of NTA. Now, we kickstart our conversation this morning on advancing human rights in Nigeria with Kene Ndulu as a backgrounder to set the tone for the discussion.
Globally, there is a consensus that all individuals are entitled to certain basic rights under any circumstances. These include certain civil liberties and political rights, the most fundamental of which is the right to life and physical safety. These basic rights are the articulation of the need for justice, tolerance, mutual respect, and human dignity in all activities of mankind. It is for the protection of these rights that the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This document was a milestone that proclaims rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of color, sex, origin, and birth. In Nigeria, despite the progress made in democratic practice, human rights violations have continued to remain an issue. Reports from the National Human Rights Commission indicate that kidnappings, extrajudicial killings, discrimination, sexual and gender-based violence are among the worst rights violations in the country today. Rights of prisoners as well as vulnerable individuals, including persons with disabilities and the elderly, are also issues that have continued to call for utmost attention. As Nigeria joins the international community to mark the 2021 Human Rights Day, the focus is on reducing inequality and advancing human rights. This theme speaks to issues around Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The commemoration of this year's Human Rights Day is also coinciding with the end of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. What are the challenges to advancing human rights in the country? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be speaking to the issues in a moment.
Thank you very much, Ekene Unduloy, for that background. With us in the studios to discuss the issues you've just highlighted and more, let's welcome Harry Oguche Obe. He's Director in charge of Women and Children's Department at the National Human Rights Commission. Mr. Obe, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Also here with us is Obaru Fiki, Legal and Human Resource Officer at Clean Foundation. Obaru, pleasure to have you this morning.
Good morning, thank you.
Also here with us in Abuja studio is Ahmad Abubakar, a human rights activist and legal practitioner. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
From our Kano studio is Dr. Uju Agomo. Uju Agomo is Executive Director, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action Power. We're glad to have you this morning on our show.
Thank you very much. I'm also glad to be here.
All right, so we are having our conversation around advancing human rights in Nigeria. But let's begin by first appraising the state of human rights in Nigeria today. And what a better way than to kick off with the Human Rights Commission, which of course is charged with the protection and advancements of human rights in the country. Mr. Harry Oguche, of course this is a broad question. What is the state of human rights in Nigeria today? Take it from any angle.
Thank you. The state of human rights in Nigeria today, like you said, it can be approached from a very broad perspective. If we want to look at how sensitive and aware people are with regard to their rights, you would say that we have made a lot of advancement or, improvement in terms of awareness, because a lot of people tend to know about their rights and they take it up with the relevant authorities. But if we want to look at it from the mirage or variety of ways that rights can be violated, we can say that the space is highly challenged, and then there is actually need for everyone to be up and doing in order to tackle the various forms of violations or threats to human rights that actually abound these days. And this is as a result of so many things that are happening currently. You can look at it from issues of COVID-19 and the implications that it has had in our space and protection of human rights generally. If you look at it from socio-cultural rights or economic rights of the people, it is more difficult for people to actually actualize themselves in terms of provision for their basic needs and all that, because of the various things that are threatening the channels of provision for those things. So it depends on how you look at it. But we will look at it from the perspective of people being aware of their rights, because no right can be fully protected if the beneficiary of that right is not aware that he holds such rights.
All right, let's turn to Ahmad Abubakar, who is a human rights activist and legal practitioner. Let's get to your own appraisal of the state of human rights advancement in Nigeria.
I want to talk about, when you look at it from the angle of access to justice, human rights is enshrined in the Constitution, in the various charter, African Charter, United Nations. All the provisions are there. A lot of people are aware of their rights. But the question that we need to ask is, are those rights being protected? At the moment, as my co-analyst rightly pointed out, a lot of people are aware of their rights. But the issue now is the enforcement. A lot of rights are being violated due to the security challenges we are currently witnessing. A lot of people have been denied access, and their essence is to allow people to have access to justice so that their rights will be protected. I want to make a reference because on a daily basis, we go out to the various security agencies. People are being detained. They are detained, some are incarcerated without anybody knowing for months. And if these things have happened during the military era, why are we still having it in a democratic setting? Most of our security agencies, they are more or less transactional. So if an issue doesn't have maybe monetary value attached to it, they tend to neglect it or shy away from it. So if you have that kind of situation, people's right will continue to be abused. And they don't have remedy, because you look at the civil society, lawyers that are engaged in program, they are overwhelmed. Go to our police stations today, go to our prisons. A lot of people are there awaiting trials. Some are kept at the pleasure of some people in authority, and nobody is doing anything about it. The Human Rights Commission, I believe, to my mind, they are overwhelmed, because it's not even everybody that have access to the commission. So more needs to be done in terms of the actualization of the goal of realizing human rights in the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmad Abubakar. Let's go over to our Kano studios, where we earlier introduced Dr. Uju Agomo. Dr. Agomo, what's your reading of the Human Rights Barometer in Nigeria?
I think basically what we have, as Harry said, is that there's been an increase in terms of people knowing what these rights are and actually identifying when their rights have been violated. But increasingly, you are asking yourself, how far have we gone since 1948, when we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights coming into force? So the question here is there's been a lot of violations. The number of persons who are being violated have increased over time. And when you look at the statistics, it is really shocking. And therefore, I think that I would say that we still have a long way to go. Perhaps on a brighter side, we can see increasingly, both globally and in Nigeria, there's been quite a lot of instruments, a lot of conventions, a lot of laws that have been put in place in terms of protecting and promoting human rights. But the implementation of those laws becomes really what is very worrisome. We still have a big problem.
All right. Obaro Fiki, what's your own take, in this respect?
Okay, I would want to say that the state of human rights in Nigeria is appalling. That's the least we can say. It's appalling. We do understand that there are a lot of international protocols and treaties which Nigeria has signed on to, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, African Charter for People and Human Rights, even the Nigerian Constitution, which is the ground norm, Chapter 4, clearly provides on the issues relating to protection of human rights in Nigeria. The National Human Rights Commission, which is also still here, through the Amendment Act of 2010, also provides their mandates in terms of monitoring and investigating issues related to human rights in Nigeria. And so, if we have to talk about it from the legal aspect, we think that there are a lot of laws, statutes that really guides or galvanizes the protection of human rights in Nigeria. But however, in terms of enforcement, in terms of implication on the field, it's really quite appalling. If you could go back, retrospect back to the COVID-19 pandemic areas, whereby a lot of rights of Nigerians were being abused and infringed upon. A lot of rights were being violated due to the lockdown and enforcement of the stay-at-home order. You will also know that there has been a lot of human rights violations. There have been a lot of enforced disappearances by both state and non-state actors in various aspects of the country. And also, coming out from the COVID-19 pandemic, we could see a high surge of violence against women and girls, which has promoted sexual and gender-based violence. And thank God we are commemorating. I was just ending the 16 days of 16 days activism against violence of women and girls in Nigeria. And so it's not really encouraging as per the state of human rights in Nigeria. However, there are still signals that the Nigerian government is not sitting down on its ass. They are doing something. The constitution of independent panel of inquiry on the NSAS panel is something to really be joyful about. It only shows that the Nigerian government is also still listening, and they also still understand the fact that atrocities committed by police, men, and security agencies need to be taken seriously, and that is why those panels were really created. So hopefully we look at the recommendations of those panels, and we think that if the recommendations are really served and sanctions are really given to erring police officers, then let's say there could be some beauty or a good road to go with regards the state of human rights violations in Nigeria.
Abaro, thank you very much. Gentlemen, before we start probing into the details of the other aspects regarding the state of human rights in Nigeria, including, for instance, threats to rights, actual violations of rights, enforcement of rights, that's by way of access to justice, and ultimately full protection of the rights. There's one aspect that you've all touched on, namely increased awareness of rights by Nigerians and persons who are resident in Nigeria. My question is going to Harry Obe. Harry, what are the factors that have conduced to this increased awareness of rights by Nigerians? And in answering that question, perhaps you also take a subset of it, namely, people are aware of their rights of citizens and government, or government and citizens, but how much awareness is there of citizen and citizen?
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me start with the first leg of your question, the factors that I think have been responsible for the increase in awareness of people's rights. I can look at it from the awareness creation by so many people, not necessarily government actors, but of course government actors or agencies tell people that you have the rights and all that. And then secondly, the pressure. Human life is such that if you are so pressured, you look for ways of manifesting the effect of that pressure on yourself. And the tendency for people to speak out, just because the intensity of pressure is so much on them, naturally comes to people. So as people feel the impact of some of the factors I talked about the other time, it can be climate change, it can be COVID-19 and other things, people tend to explode. They want to say, I am not comfortable. So when they speak out, and because we also have provisions of some amenities, we have increase in access to ICT, telecommunication, and all that. So the space is now open for people to actually be aware, and they have many other mechanisms to speak out. And I can also say that the sensitivity of Nigerians to the feelings of their neighbors can also be actually one of the factors that have led to the increase in awareness of people, and then people also report on all this. Now, to the second leg of your question, I think we tend to focus on government as the only duty bearer in terms of right protection, or we exaggerated the role of government. Because first and foremost, yes, we have laws that make government the duty bearer, because if you have a right holder, there has to be a corresponding duty bearer. But we also owe ourselves duties of protection. And it is also there in the law or the standards that countries are meant to actually use to have laws in their countries. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, individuals are also flagged as a duty bearer for right protection. So we need to actually look at issues from a wholesome perspective. While government is the primary duty bearer, individuals also have duties to uphold the respect for human rights of each other. So now we can say that people tend to not so much project the issue of the obligation of individuals because it takes some resources or effort on the part of the person that is pressured to ventilate his grievances. Maybe you have to go to court sometimes, and this requires resources. And because you don't have so much resources, you tend to stomach it. Then we also have some cultural and traditional factors or arrangements that tend to deal with individual to individual violations. And so people settle some of these things unreported. So it's a mystery of factors. So, but for us to have actually a well-protected environment, we need to balance our expectation, not just from government, but even from individuals.
Okay, and I'll take it from there, the obligations of individuals as part of duty bearer. So I'd like to ask Ahmed to do an explanation on this. What are those obligations of individuals to guarantee and protect the human right?
You see, for the sustenance and practicability of the enforcement of human rights, every citizen, every individual in any given country, you are expected, where your rights, you have certain rights that have been provided in the Constitution, in the United Nations Charter. Those rights can only function optimally if you allow the rights of others to thrive. If you live in an environment, I make a reference to where I live. Some days people blare music, you cannot even sleep. They have a right to religion, but if they are practicing their religion, they should equally factor in that as an individual, you equally have a right to life. And life here goes beyond just being alive. You need rest to function optimally. So people should be conscious of the fact that it is not only government. We have a whole role to play. You ask yourself, who are the people in the police station? Who are the people in the judiciary? Who are the people that enforces those rights that have been protected? It's written. It's one thing to have it encapsulated in the various laws, the gamuts of law. It's another thing for you to enforce it. Let me share an example with you. We have recently the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. Beautiful, wonderful provisions to protect the rights of a suspect. They are allowed access to their lawyers. They are allowed access to give statements in the presence of their lawyer. But if you go to most security agencies, including those in the city centers, that you expect them to have a certain level of exposure, a certain level of experience, and the nature of where they are living, they should be able to protect the rights of those people they are supposed to investigate. You now have situations where you have security agencies deliberately violating the rights of their fellow citizens just to appease either those in government or those that have the means. And these things go unreported and nothing is being done about it. So for individuals, the rights of others can only be protected if we as citizens of every nation strive deliberately to protect those rights. The laws are there. We have so many laws, but those laws will have no impact if we cannot collectively respect the right of others. And it's not only about in terms of violation. We must take positive action to protect those rights. You are going on the street, you see a child walking, wandering about, and you do nothing. You see people's rights being violated. The thing is that if you keep mute, they are violating somebody's right. The next day, it will turn back. We've seen security personnel that have violated people's rights, and tomorrow they are coming back to the same lawyers. They denied access to detain them suspect. They are now seeking the protection of the same people, they violated their rights. It happens. Life is a circle. So if people think that human rights issue has been over-dramatized, and in a way that it will not affect them, it's just a matter of time. Everybody, we are a potential suspect. Your rights as an individual, there's that potential that one day, in one circumstance or the other, it will be violated. So it's duty bound on us to ensure that we protect it. We take proactive steps. The laws are there. Now it's now about the citizens. What role are they playing? If you are keeping mute, if you are not taking positive action, if your rights are being violated or other people's rights are being violated, and you are shying away from taking action. People talk about resources of not having, but the Human Rights Commission, you can put up a petition. If you see somebody's right has been violated and he has no means, and you don't have means to get a lawyer, there are lawyers that are engaged in pro bono service, there are human rights organizations, and you have a right as a citizen of the country to write straightly to the Human Rights Commission. We have the Public Complaint Commission. All these organizations, they've been taking action, but it's for the individuals now to kickstart these things that will make the process for other people to intervene.
Okay, Ahmad Abubakar, thank you very much. I want to return to Dr. Uju Agomo in our Kano Network Center. Dr. Agomo, we're still on the aspect relating to increased awareness of the rights doctrine amongst citizens and indeed governments. Again, from your own point of view, tell us what are the driving factors in increased awareness, and more importantly, does the awareness also now influence the role of citizens in the duties matrix, or just holding government solely as a duty bearer, as Harry Obey has indicated?
Thank you very much. I think some of the factors that have actually helped to increase the awareness, I mean, the issue about social media is one. The other thing that we must also take into cognizance is the role of civil society organization. And even in terms of talking about civil society organizations, I do not also want to ignore the fact of the role of the media. For example, see what you're doing now. It is also something that will help and continually help in letting people know that these are rights. So where we are actually is a point whereby the government, yes, have a critical role to play. The citizens have to also hold government accountable. That is a critical role that the citizens have to play. Now, I must also say that one of the things I feel that we should be pushing more is the fact that, yes, there are rights, but each and every one of us also have responsibilities. So if we understand that our obligations and our responsibilities as first and foremost, as citizens, as our brothers or our sisters' keeper, then it kind of helps. But one thing I have found out is that people will continually violate laws or commit atrocities if they know they can get away with it. And this is really where we must ensure there is an end to impunity. That we must, as a people, say that once somebody has violated the rights of another, every mechanism must be put in place to hold the perpetrator accountable. And that these persons must be found, and once you have been able to do that, it deters future perpetrators from doing so. Now, remember earlier we spoke about some of this fact that there are laws and all that. They have made a mention of the issue that you have, for example, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, and that's 2015. There are administration of criminal justice laws in many states of the Federation. Beyond that, you have the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended. If you look at Chapter 4, for example, you will see barrage of civil and political rights that have been protected. The question is, to what extent are those things being achieved? Look at Chapter 2, Socioeconomic and Cultural Rights. And I think also as a nation, we must come to get rid of the fact that we must ensure that weddings of Chapter 2 is not just made to be aspirational. We must ensure that the rights for Nigerians to health, the right to have jobs, the right to be able to have proper shelter is also looked into, because there is a very close connection between that and even the rights that you see that are embedded in the Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution. Now, you also have of course, the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, and many others. So if you are then asking, what is the place for the citizen? The place for the citizen is to say, I will stand together to say no to this. Look at the issue about torture. It's going on every day. Yet Nigeria is signatory to the UN Convention on Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment and Punishment. Yet Nigeria is also signatory to the optional protocol to the same instrument, which provides for national preventive mechanism. So again, as citizens, we must say, we come together, wherever there is a violation, we take steps. And every mechanism of the government must be put in place to ensure that there is an end to impunity. So there is a lot of demand on the government because it's critical and it's important. And that's basically what the UN had made it so. But the citizens need to also do their bit. And I must also say that part of that role of the government is to make it easier for the citizens to do that. That once the citizens are pushing for their rights, that they are also protected. Because that is important. There are a lot of people who are not speaking up because they are scared. They are not speaking up because they know that somebody will hit back at them. How much are we protecting the witnesses? How much are we providing psychological support and cushioning for the families of victims? How much are we bearing the burden of the economic cost for those people who want to indeed challenge their violations of rights? So I believe that both angles have to be taken care of. And clearly, there's a lot that is demanded and required for the government, but the citizens must actually push to make this work.
All right, Obarofiki, we also take you on that, on the role of citizens, because they say that where one right stops, another right begins. And invariably, if the citizens are found wanting in terms of, making their own contributions, towards the protection of human rights, of course, all the efforts being made by Human Rights Commission, will be in vain. And you can also take it from this other angle. The fact that law enforcement agencies in Nigeria perhaps do not have much respect for human rights, based on the issues you have also raised in your first comment as to the issue concerning, not you really, Ahmed raised, with respect to the fact that in some cases, the enforcers of the law do not even respect the human rights. If, of course, a court says, look, give access to someone's lawyer in a court case, for instance, the person will be denied. And yet, these are individuals who should be in the know of what human rights is all about.
Okay, I would want to commence with this premise, which provides basically that you cannot have an egalitarian society if individuals do not respect the rights of others. And it's very critical in ensuring that while we fight for our rights, we should also still respect the rights of our neighbors, of those also in our society. It is worrisome that individuals perpetually infringe on the rights of others, and they do think that it's also the responsibility of government. The incursions of non-state actors in the violation of human rights, it's alarming. It's not just a matter of the state actors. The non-state actors have done that. The issues in the Northeast till tomorrow, it's something that is worrisome, and it's something that we also still need to talk about. A lot of citizens have been displaced. Their rights have been lost as a result of the conscience of non-state actors. The elements of Boko Haram, ISWAP in those areas has also led a lot of rights denied, and it has led for a lot of forced disappearances of individuals. And so when we look at it from this perspective, we also find out that it's not really state actors do have their own roles to play in ensuring that the rights are protected, the rights are enforced, the rights are being enshrined. However, non-state actors have also perpetrated these things, and they do not really care for the rights of their fellow citizens. They do not care for the rights of their fellow neighbors. We will talk about the chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, which basically spells out between section 32 to 43 of of the Constitution, which basically states the rights of individuals. However, at our own places, at our own areas, how have we protected the rights of others? I think citizens need to ask themselves these vital questions even as we commemorate this day. Basically, we should also still look at the fact that while we do understand that the National Human Rights Commission plays a role as a foremost government agency in the protection of human rights of Nigerians, I do not still feel that most Nigerians know the mandate of NHRC. I still feel that there is still this gap, information gap, between the citizens and also NHRC regarding their function and mandates. If not because of the services of civil society organizations, pro bono lawyers, and the rest, a lot of citizens do not really know that National Human Rights Commission really exists. And so, while we do know that social media has helped in promoting the responsibilities of these organizations, we still feel that the National Human Rights Commission should still do more in its awareness creation, in our awareness campaign for Nigerians to know the purpose or the mandate of why the National Human Rights Commission is being established for. And I will also still look at it from this perspective. We should also still know that during the NSAS panels, which were constituted by various state governments and such, a lot of Nigerian citizens or petitioners who at a time had written petitions regarding violations of brutality of police personnel, some of them at the end of the day stood out because of threats to life. It certainly also still means that even the security personnel who do protect citizens also had in one way or the other, though unsubstantiated, threatening the lives of petitioners. And you could see that that is what led to from the rising number of petitions to the limited number of recommendations from most of these state panels, because a lot of petitioners could not finish up their petitions in these panels as a result of threats. And then in respect to security agencies not protecting the rights of Nigerians, I think the average Nigerian policeman, I would want to say it in this way, does not even know the rights. I do not really know whether they have even been taught the fundamental human rights, right-based approach in policing. I think most of these police officers who really know these rights, who really enforce these rights, are really the big officers, those you see in the urban centers, those you see in Abuja, those you see in Lagos. What about the policemen in Abakaliki? What about the policemen in my village, for example, in Ozoro? Do they really know the rights of citizens? Do we really have right-based policing trainings in Nigerian police institutions? What is really the curriculum in these institutions? And so I think we have to go back to the drawing board, especially with regards to security agencies and Nigerian policing, about understanding the rights of Nigerians and enforcing these rights so that Nigerians also can be protected and we can have a good base in protecting human rights in Nigeria.
Okay, but thank you very much, Obaro, for the points you have raised, and indeed the other guests. One aspect, we're going to keep it and we'll return to it, that has to do with proper rights education for law enforcement officers. It's come up on Good Morning Nigeria a number of times in the past, and you find that cops who are on the beat have very little understanding or knowledge of the law that they are seeking to enforce in the first instance. But I just want, before we get into areas of rights violation by government and government agencies as well as enforcement, one aspect that has come up, because it was a point that was dropped, that you say, look, you build an egalitarian society where citizens respect one another, respect the rights of one another. So we talk about awareness, Harry, and look, in the Nigerian Constitution, it is there in Chapter 4 that there is a right to property. And property, of course, can be realty or personality. And earlier, Ahmad also talked about the right to life. Let's look at two scenarios in Nigeria, for instance, in terms of citizen-to-citizen relationship. Intellectual property rights are wantonly violated in Nigeria. Wantonly. In other words, I mean, we are all familiar with it. People just steal your intellectual property and they think that it is fun. Landed property in some urban locations in Nigeria is a game of war. You will find squatters, you'll find poachers, you'll find all kinds of elements who will encroach on your land, who will even take over your property, sell it to another person and say, go to court. And when you are then seeking to enforce your right, then they bring in assassins and they put people to sleep. And so, do people have this understanding? Because if a dead man can't fight over a landed property except those who are managing his estate, and that's why Amma was saying, look, the right to life on the one hand, also the right to life means you have to be alive to enjoy that right. If you have noise pollution all over the place, and Nigeria, person will threaten you if you don't take time, as sometimes they will say, I will just kill you. So why do we have this pervasive, if you like, violation of some kinds of rights that we do not seem to be aware of, citizens to citizens? I talk now about intellectual property, landed property, and even the enjoyment of life.
Yeah, thank you. I always tell people that if you observe how human beings behave, you will understand that it is almost natural or innate in every human being to seek the soft spot and oppress it. So we are naturally wired to act for the strong to oppress the weak. So if we don't have a strong system of deterrent legislations or arrangements, policies that tend to deter people from expressing that innate oppressive tendency, then it will be pervasive. That is exactly what we're seeing. If somebody sees a property, we are covetous in nature. You want good things. You are not able to afford it. Another person has it. So if there are no laws protecting the owners of those things that you're actually targeting, then the tendency is for you to want to grab it. You either get it legitimately or illegitimately. So the law is expected to protect those that have it legitimately, to keep it, and also ward off those that want to acquire it illegitimately or through force. So we now need to understand why society exists. People sidestep what they naturally can afford in terms of ability, natural ability through force, to ensure that there's an authority that creates an environment of safety for all. So if we do not enforce the laws that protect that protect the rights of everyone in the society, for instance, somebody has a law, a land, like you said, this is very pervasive in Abuja, because I have people around me that have been victims of this. There are cliques that appears to be known to so many people that go into this. They just search around. If you have not developed a property, they just go into it. And like you said, they say go to court. Because they know that going to court will delay, the process of you getting this thing back. Or eventually, you see them mutilating records to ensure that, okay, they take what rightly belongs to you. So apart from people knowing what their rights are, we need an environment that actually seeks to enforce the laws that are available so that people can actually seek protection through those laws. And I tell you, if we do not check these practices, no matter how much is invested in terms of human rights education, we'll just be going around the cycle. People will deliberately know what the law is. In fact, there's a saying that you should read the law, know the law, so that you know how to violate it or how to escape this thing. So if the accountability process is not strong enough, people will seek to use the soft spot and use the same law to get away with their crimes.
It is said in some cases that don't break the law, but you can bend the law to be able to achieve your aims and objectives. I think this question that Kingsley raised is very pertinent, because when individuals begin to violate the right of other individuals, then we have a more serious problem. Because most times we talk about government not adhering to human rights. We talk about some institutions, especially the law enforcement establishments, not adhering to human rights issues. But this time around, the individuals are even more involved in violating other persons' human rights. So in this case, what is the difference between collective rights and individual rights?
Let me continue from where Harry stopped. In terms of the life case situation that we have witnessed. You see, when the system and the structures are not working optimally, in terms of enforcement of laws and rights, then the room for abuses and impunity will be rife. Let me put it this way. You have cases that have lasted for 10 years, 5 years, and has not even started. And maybe it borders on issue of your right or landed property. It means the signal is there, it's being sent that yes, I can violate right and go scot-free. Individuals are even more in terms of perpetuating and violating human rights, because it's people that goes to the station to go and make complaint and report. And in terms of making those kind of reports, some they fabricate lies, and the security agencies that are duty bound to investigate and not only hear one side, they take side, because we know sometimes money exchange hands. As I said, some security outfits are now transactional, in the sense that if your rights, or if they want somebody's rights to be violated, they look at what is at stake. They now demand for commission. The courts have ruled severally that security agencies are not debt recovery agents or agencies. You see them deviating from their core duty, protecting of life and property. They are now going into civil transaction. They want to go and recover debt. The same issue of landed property, a single property will be sold to about 5 different people, running into hundreds of millions. A lot of people, even lawyers, have been victim of those scammers. I've had a live case where we conducted a search at Aegis. The lawyer in custody of the original title document, they lured him to come that there's a buyer that wants to buy that property. So the search now will be a valid search because he's holding custody of the original title document. But as he's leaving, they already have clone one that you cannot even distinguish which is the clone. And these things can only work. You see now, even a lawyer is involved. The official there in the agency is involved. And the people, and a lot of people have lost millions, hundreds of millions of naira. And if they now want to now enforce their rights, then you now have those same people using security agencies to violate their rights. So you see, the government have a lot of responsibility, but individuals are the main actors in violating those. And because the system and the structures are not checking that, it gives them a lot of impunity. If you know you file a case and the case will take up to 5 years before you get justice, and when you get that justice, at times even enforcement is a problem. You cannot enforce those the judgment of the court because they appeal it. They use various means to frustrate it. So we have a very, very, very serious problem at hand. And unless we all come together, because it's not about government alone, it's the individual that actually instigates most of those government agencies to violate people's rights. So if you look at it from the one angle, you are trying to demand accountability on the part of the government. Then you now have the individual that have been able to really appreciate the way that the system is not working optimally. They circumvent it, they abuse it, they use that to their advantage. You continue to have issues. And if this continue, you know, a lot of people will take a lot of things for granted. But we are getting to a point whereby there will be an implosion, because these things have been in the minds of so many people. If you are talking about land, just recently, go around the city center in Abuja, you have a lot of displaced people now taking permanent refuge under the bridges. At a point in time, I thought that maybe there's an event going on, and I discovered that you see family members, internally displaced people, various camps springing up everywhere, even in the city center. One thing that accounts for it, you lack a high level of poverty, high level of insecurity, and the system. So as a lawyer, I will go back to the judiciary. We now need to go back and let's have the system of recruitment. We need independent, proactive, and judges that could look the government into their faces and say, no, we must start doing things right through judicial activism. Nobody should be allowed to use the judiciary to abuse the rights of individuals.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmad, for your points. Dr. Uju Agoma, I would like you to weigh in on this aspect. and what can be done to attenuate citizens' violation of the rights of other citizens. We've just used the examples of property rights, intellectual property, landed property, and even the right to life.
First, I think it's important to explain that the dichotomy is not really as dramatic as perhaps many will think of. The issue is that when individuals violate rights, it is left for the government to activate the mechanism of the government to hold those individuals accountable. So it is not strange. It is, as a matter of fact, that is what it is. Every time there is a violation, it is not a spirit that violates, it's an individual. Now, if that individual is an official within a government agency, then it depends on a different level of standard in terms of who are the persons that can be held culpable, including, of course, the agencies or the nominal members of that particular institution. So let me take a very simple example. If you look at Article 1 of the United Nations Convention Against Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment, it talks about what is the definition of torture. And as he's saying that, it tells you that it is in terms of public officials, whether they do that act or refuse to do it, so either a commission or omission, or they instigate another person to do it, or there is questions, means you do nothing, in terms of you look the other way when there is a problem. So you are also held accountable. So I just want us to understand that even where individuals violate rights, it does not mean that it has to stay on its own. There is already, that's actually why you have the system of justice. It then means that something needs to be activated. The law enforcement agencies, both in terms of policing, both in terms of prosecution, both in terms of trial, both in terms of then when the sanctions have been given, in terms of administering whatever sanction that has been given. So once we note that, then it becomes very, very easy to understand. So again, I believe that the mechanisms of the government must be made to happen. So even when we talk about awareness, let's also not think that this awareness means that we are already there. I will give you an example. In 2017, Nigeria passed the Anti-Torture Act. But I tell you, we go around different parts of this country and we're doing training for law enforcement agencies. Oftentimes, you come, zero number of them in a class of, say, 50 or 30 have ever seen or heard about the Anti-Torture Act of 2017. Yet, we say generally people are aware, but you are then asking, to what extent are the very relevant provisions of these laws made not to be knowledgeable? You ask, what can we do? We need to be able to ensure that all the institutions, and here when I'm talking about these institutions, I am talking about from the primary to the secondary to the tertiary institution, should be made aware of this. The law students, social scientists, and all the rest of that. Then you come to law enforcement agencies. I'm also aware that on 5 different areas, and I will name them: human rights, interagency cooperation, civil-military relations, democratic principles, and rule of law, are 5 areas that there is attempt now to have a harmonized curriculum for all the security agencies. And I believe that once this is done, and it is actually being looked at to make sure that every recruit coming in gets to understand the same thing across board. So it is not only about awareness, we must ensure that the content of what we teach, but it must be taught in such a way that it should be able to change behavior. Sometimes people say knowledge is power, and I always say there is something wrong with that. It is not knowledge being power, it's the knowledge that is used. Knowledge that is used, that is utilized, that becomes powerful. So this training must be such that when people have acquired them, they must be able to utilize them. And those who do utilize them needs to be celebrated. I believe very critically that if we're able to put certain levels of incentives to enable people comply with laid down laws, it makes it easier. Both in terms of agencies providing policing function, law enforcement agencies, and also adjudicating functions. So that once we do this, then people know that if I do the right thing, I am going to be rewarded. But not when those who do perhaps the wrong things are the ones being rewarded. So those levels of incentive, and oftentimes, what makes people change their behavior is not so much of what you put as the law. It is the certainty that when they violate, they will be caught. It is the certainty that then when they are caught, they will be duly prosecuted. It is the certainty that then when they are duly prosecuted, that they will be found guilty. It is the certainty that then when they are found guilty, they will be duly sanctioned. It is the certainty that then when they are sanctioned, that they will serve the sanction. You see, these levels of certainty is what will make people stop doing the wrong thing. But where there is a problem, that you know that when you do anything, you can get away with being caught, or that even when you are being caught, you can bribe your way out and you won't be prosecuted, or even when you are prosecuted, you can bribe your way out and you won't be found culpable, or even when you are found culpable, you can bribe your way out and you will not be sanctioned, or even if you are sanctioned, you will not serve the term of your sanction. It is these levels of certainty that makes it work. Now, in the Anti-Torture Act of 2017, they said if you torture somebody, you will have at least maybe up to 25 years. How many persons, how many law enforcement agencies have been sanctioned to 25 years, including those people who do not know that these laws exist? And they say if somebody dies in the process, you will be treated as someone who have killed, still under the criminal law. So again, the distinction between what individuals do or do not do, there is also laws to either take it either through the civil course or through the criminal course. That is not really a problem. What becomes a problem is when there is a systemic process that makes it difficult to find justice. It is this notion of lack of access to justice. It is this notion of increasingly ignoring the vulnerable. That is what we need to fight about, because it is not right. It is not right. There are many. And if you look at the theme of today, what is it talking about? Equality, reducing inequality, and advancing human rights. How are we doing that? How are we ensuring that every human being is treated equal, as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights have said? How are we ensuring that we are dealing with all the inequalities? Go to the custodial centers. There are people who are in custodial centers that are innocent, and the many detention facilities. Innocent people being detained because they don't have money, because they don't have anybody to speak for them. There are those who are there, minor offenders. What have they done? They are hawking. Meanwhile, you have not provided where they should be able to trade. There is no job for them. And yet you pick them. If they can't pay your fine, you lock them up. That is wrong. So if you are able to move away those people who are innocent, those people who are minor and petty offenders out of the system, giving them non-custodial if he really deserves, and ensuring there is social justice for God's sake, we will have a more healthy environment. An environment where people who come out can easily access jobs. People who come out can easily access welfare. We will reduce what we do to our justice system. We will reduce the problem that we have in terms of what is pushing our security system to have problem. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we are celebrating today, it tells us that the foundation of peace is freedom. It's respecting human dignity. It's unity. There was a reason that the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 did what they did, because they said we have seen the atrocities of the Second World War, and we must say no to it. We must protect the vulnerable. We must protect those who are being governed from those who are governing them, if they are governing them through draconian laws. We must ensure the right thing is done. And I think this is really the time to ask citizens, both those in uniform and those who are out not in uniform, to ask those who have authorities and power to utilize those authorities and power and to do the needful. It is essential. And I think that if we can achieve that, then we will make headway. Where everyone, actually I think what we should look at is human rights is a collective responsibility. Let everyone use the sphere of their influence to do something to make sure that the promotion and protection of human rights becomes truly a reality, not only in the general nation, in the towns, but in the cities and everywhere they find themselves. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Agomor, you have indeed, covered a great deal of perspectives in your last submission. I was going to ask you to let us know what the human rights situation is in prisons, because you are a director of prisons rehabilitation and welfare action. I wanted to know what it is like at the correctional centers, because if you know this much, perhaps you must have ensured that your knowledge of this must have played a role in terms of how prisoners are handled. Just in few seconds.
Okay, I will do that. I will do that. Thank you very much. First, I will say, before I start, I just want to remind us of what Winston Churchill said. He said that the way to know the civilization, a country or nation who is civilized, is to look at what they do to the people who are in their places of detention, in their so-called prisons and things like that. So yes, you have in our custody, in our correctional centers, and indeed in many detention facilities across the country, 3 types of persons. You have, as you have heard me say before, there are those who are innocent. They didn't do anything. They are the right people in the wrong places, and you don't need anybody to argue the fact that these ones need not to be there. Of course, there are people who are minor offenders, and the minor offenders and petty offenders, yes, they need to be sanctioned, but they don't need to be kept in places of detention, because one single moment you spend in places of detention becomes problematic. And because we are not dealing with this whole process, that is why, as of today, we have over 74% of the prison the facility or population in terms of our custodial centers as those who are yet to be convicted. And when I say 74%, I am talking generally. If you look in certain facilities, that population is as high as 90% in some instances. And I can call names. Some of them is about 80%. Now, your guess is as good as mine, that you find out that the custodial centers and the correctional officers would find it very difficult to promote any form of adequate rehabilitation or reintegration or even resettlement for those who are released in that kind of context. So we have a situation where there is a avoiding issues relating to the facilities. Now, when I say that this is the proportion that are awaiting trial, it is important to understand that that population is there and many times for a long period. A lot of times for those people who may even stay beyond the time that they would have been, convicted, even if they were, they have said even if they were convicted. So that becomes problematic. There are 2 major things that you need to watch. The third category, of course, are those who are serious offenders, which I said, those ones, they need to be taken care of and rehabilitated, because unless the person dies in custody, it's going to come out someday. And therefore, we must invest in their rehabilitation and all that. The 2 factors that we must deal with is the rate of having people being received in custody. Once you deal with that, and the duration in custody, you will be able to deal with the population. But once we are not addressing that effectively, it becomes problematic. So all of that is content. You are creating tension. They are having jail breaks. You are having, challenges in terms of rehabilitation, and the offending rates is increasing. So that becomes a challenge. Here, therefore, if you look at the fact that a lot of young people are found in our custodial factors, don't forget the earlier point I made about these issues about social access to justice, social, justice itself, relating even to things about jobs that are not there. So you are having the vulnerabilities of these individuals, and that brings adequate challenges. You are having vulnerability on the families. Many of their families are hurting. Remember, including families of those who are innocent. And there have also been found a channel, what you call circles of challenges, because many of those families, once you take their breadwinner into the custody, certain things begin to affect. Even those who were not criminal before, their family members will begin to do that. But when you look at the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, there were a lot of reforms that were put in place. That law, if you look at, for example, Section 2, subsection 1A to D of that law, clearly states even the things that should make us happy today that we are celebrating human rights. The first thing, it says that the objective of this law is to make Nigeria to comply with international human rights as well as good correctional practices. The second one, it says it is to promote enabling platform for the effective implementation of non-custodial measures. The third, it says it is to promote correction, reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration. And then the fourth, which is the final one, it says it is to reduce the number of persons who are awaiting trial. And to put in place systemic and institutional as well as sustainable mechanism to address it. Section 12 also reinforces it. But the truth is that that wonderful piece of legislation as it is needs to be implemented. At the moment, there is no funding, as much as we are aware, to activate the full implementation of non-custodial measures. Then how do we progress as a nation? So this is a piece of law that even other African countries are so happy they are asking for subcopy that they want to begin to utilize and adapt for their own jurisdiction. So why will we not celebrate what we have and put in place mechanism to make it work? So these are part of the thing you see. So you see, you have the correctional centers, you have custodial, But you have also the non-custodial element. So as a people, we must ensure that the non-custodial is also fully resourced so that we reduce the burden on the custodial. It also enables us to make sure that the whole issue of security and addressing the offending and preventing offending behavior, because it's not only waiting till when the people have done it. We need to have a mechanism to prevent offending behavior through engaging early warning signals to be able to address these people. And it is possible. It is doable. One of the things I want to challenge us to do, and if we can, it will be great. Is it possible that all local governments will begin to look at having a place whereby the youth can come in there and you build their skills, you will help them in terms of bringing cohesion. If they have drug challenges, you have drug abuse challenges, you assist them, you counsel them, you direct them. If we can do this in the 774 local governments, identify mentors that can assist them, we will go a long way in reducing the youth bulge. Please, we are sitting on a hot keg. We should not be ignoring our young people. We have a disproportionate number of young people, and the policies that we are having is pushing many of them into criminal behavior. We cannot continue as a nation this way. So again, I want to encourage people to look at what is happening in the correctional sector and support the correctional sector and see it as part and parcel of the justice system and see it as part and parcel of the security architecture as well as aspects that should promote security sector reform, and see it as part of what will promote development. It is only when we do that that we can come out from the danger. I wanted to say the threat of danger. We already know is here. But we pray that God will help us until we can move to ensure that we divert the imminent danger.
All right, Dr. Uju Agomo, Executive Director, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action Power, would like to appreciate you for your contribution to our discussion this morning. We know you have another engagement. You joined us from our Kano Network Center. We wish you the very best. And we hope to have you back someday. It's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get into the concluding minutes of today's conversation.
Since coming into office in 2015, the Buhari administration has recorded unprecedented achievements in all sectors, especially in the provision of infrastructure, which is the key to economic growth. Never in the history of this country has any other administration done so much with so little. I recall that when this administration came into office, the price of crude oil, which provides for 80% of Nigeria's budgetary revenues and 95% of foreign exchange earning, dropped drastically, thus reducing the amount of resources available to the federal government. In spite of this, the administration has continued apace with massive infrastructure developments.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
It's a trip back to Anfield for Steven Gerrard as he takes his new team to face the Reds. This Saturday, it's Liverpool versus Aston Villa on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, just, of course, we're getting to the closing minutes of today's conversation. One point that came up earlier has to do with, according to Ahmad, the many instances of prolonged detention, often without trial. And I thought that in the lead up to the Fourth Republic, where you had the advocacy against military rule, one of the anticipated gains was that arbitrary detentions and violations of the rule of law, and therefore violation of the rights of citizens, right to liberty and freedom of expression, would be greatly attenuated. Well, it would appear that even under the Fourth Republic, there are instances of prolonged detention without trial, and sometimes, as has been indicated, in parts of the Northeast, forced disappearances. And yet, there are clear provisions in the Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution as amended, stipulating the length of time within which an individual can be held, otherwise the person is released or prosecuted or otherwise arraigned. Why are we having this, and what can be done to reduce the high incidence as it appears to be the case now?
Okay, I would want to comment with the provisions of the Administrative Criminal Justice Act 2015 and also the Administrative Criminal Justice laws in a lot of states which are operational. And I think its law was really emphasized to take care of issues in relation to unlawful detention of citizens and of individuals. It was also meant to ensure that trials are speedy and that justice is given to those who deserve them. But however, we have seen the case that even with 6 years or 7 years down the line, a lot of issues relating to unlawful detentions still suffices. And this basically, for me, is as a result of lack of interagency coordination between the prosecutors and the arresting institutions, which is the Nigerian police and other bodies that have the powers to arrest and detain in Nigeria. The disconnect between the prosecutors, which basically are the Ministry of Justice and the Department of Public Prosecution, and the Nigerian police, has shown that it's going to be very, very, very long, and it's going to be a difficult journey in ensuring that unlawful detention really ends in Nigeria, because basically the powers to detain, even if the ICJ lies with the powers of the magistrates, most of the cases instituted by the police goes to the magisterial divisions, and the magistrates also have their own powers in respect to detention, and also limits whereby they can also give rulings, and before you know them, a lot of persons are being put into unlawful detention, and they are awaiting trials, waiting for courts of superior jurisdictions to take over these cases. And this has led to a lot of Nigerians being unlawfully detained. And so what do we think are the solutions? Is to ensure basically that, one, there is speedy coordination and interagency coordination between the Nigerian police and all other actors in this field. Two, is to ensure that the Nigerian prisons are decongested, or Nigerian correctional centers are decongested. And this has to do with taking care of a lot of people who have minor offenses who are detained, who has also made the Nigeria correctional centers not habitable even for Nigerians. And this it can also be taken care of when we all talk about ensuring that petty offenses are being decriminalized. We have to decriminalize petty offenses. We have to ensure that the non-custodial measures as enshrined in Nigeria Correctional Service Act is being entrenched. And then once we do that, we find out that the Nigeria Correctional Centers certainly would be habitable for Nigerians. But however, also the issue of funding, which Dr. Uju also talked about, is also very key. Nigerian government needs to urgently fund the Nigerian Correctional Services. The Nigerian government needs to actually fund the Nigerian correctional centers to ensure that we also live up to its mandate. We should know critically that while the Nigerian police has a Police Trust Fund Act that takes care of issues related to equipment and welfare of police officers, that thing has not been done for the Nigerian Correctional Service. We believe that the Nigerian Correctional Center it's in a state of emergency and needs to be taken care of. And if
let us just pause you there,
Okay.
because you have made a very clear explanation as to what is the reason, why we have a congested correctional centers in Nigeria, because of course the complications or the complexities of, the police and of course those responsible for taking people who have been arrested to court and all of that. Those things are very complicating, and if you start that conversation today, it will not end in the next hour. Right. Oguche, you are the Director of Women and Children Department, National Human Rights Commission. Women and children are said to be most vulnerable when it comes to human rights violations. Tell us about it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Women and children are vulnerable because of the lack of capacity to actually protect themselves or take initiatives that will give them some form of protection. And some of the reasons for this are rooted in our cultures and tradition, where the architecture of the society is woven by men to the detriment of women in most cases. But we have a lot of laws and policies in place now that is supposed to bring the women and children from the level of inequalities to some level of equality and power. And so to deal with the cases that perpetually hold the women and children down, what we need is everyone's hands on board. The men should be part of it. You can see from what I'm wearing, he for she, a lot of men should actually take up the challenge to see that the vulnerable in the society, including women and children, are actually helped to some level of near equality, if not equality, by utilizing the laws and the mechanisms in place, like the National Human Rights Commission, approaching those mechanisms to ensure that these people are protected and that these people are actually helped out of their vulnerability, since most times the first casualty of any form of oppression is your inability to speak for yourself.
Ahmad Abubakar, closing thoughts briefly.
A closing thought. Security agencies are the major driver in terms of human rights violation, and what is required of them is to have a rethink. Their offices for a limited time, they will join the civil society, they will come to a civilized world, and what their actions, the marks that the footprint that they leave, they should know that they could be victim as well. So everybody should see human rights and the enforcement as a collective responsibility, a duty to God, a duty to mankind.
Okay.
All right. Ahmad Abubakar, human rights activist and legal practitioner, we appreciate your being around this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Obaro Fiki, legal and human rights resource officer at Clean Foundation, thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Harry Oguche Obe, who is a director at the National Human Rights Commission, would like to thank you also for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that does it for our conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria today. Let's take a couple or one of our segments before we wrap it up.
Sports.
Abu Dhabi will be the final race of the Formula One season for another decade after the country signed a new contract to host a Grand Prix. The Yas Marina circuit, which hosted its first Grand Prix in 2009, has secured a race until 2030. The track had developed a reputation for producing dull races, but the circuit's layout has been extensively revised for this year's championship showdown between Max Verstappen